Dive into our newest narrative, Sailing the Seas of Cosmic Dreams, crafted with care by StoryWave.ai. Show your support by liking, sharing, and subscribing for a new story every day. Chapter 1: The Heart of Uncertainty. I always believed my heart was invincible, an unyielding engine powering the vessel of my being through the tempest of life. Yet there I stood, on the precipice of the unknown, as the steady hum of hospital machinery sang a dissonant lullaby. The antiseptic scent of the ward clawed at my senses, a stark reminder of the fragility of existence. My name is William Smith, and this is the tale of how I stared into the abyss of non-being and emerged with a cosmos cradled in my chest. The world outside the operating theater seemed a distant memory, a mirage of a life I could only hope to reclaim. Elizabeth Murphy, my cardiologist, stood before me, her presence a fortress of calm in the storm. "Will, everything's been prepared. It's a routine procedure, but I need you to understand the risks involved," she said, her voice the epitome of professional assurance, tinged with a warmth that belied her youth. I nodded, my own voice betraying none of the turbulent thoughts that swirled within. "I understand, Liz. I trust you," I replied, the gravity of the situation cementing my resolve. The weight of my 50 years bore down on me, and yet I felt as though I stood at the threshold of eternity, about to embark on a voyage beyond my wildest imaginings. As the anesthesia whispered its sweet oblivion, I succumbed to its embrace, not knowing it would be the catalyst for my odyssey through the stars. A serene panorama unfolded before me, a celestial ocean where nebulae bloomed like cosmic flora, and astral currents guided me toward an ineffable horizon. My corporeal self lay suspended in that ethereal sea, my consciousness liberated from its mortal coil. In this boundless expanse, I encountered an entity, an amalgam of wisdom and wonder, whose presence dwarfed my own. "Why am I here? What is this place?" I ventured, my voice a mere thought within the vastness. The being responded, not in words, but in a symphony of understanding that resonated through my essence. "You sail upon the waters of potentiality, where life and death dance in eternal courtship. Here the fabric of reality weaves threads of what was, what is, and what could be." I pondered the enigma before me, my mind grappling with the revelations that unfurled like the petals of an otherworldly blossom. "Am I dead?" I queried, the question an anchor seeking purchase in the fluidity of this dreamscape. Death is but a transformation, a shedding of one form for another. You hover in the liminal, a traveler between realms, the entity imparted, its voice the very vibration of existence. I awoke to the sterile confines of the post-op room, the steady beep of the heart monitor, an ode to my survival. Richard Hawke, a journalist whose skepticism was as notorious as my own programming prowess, awaited me, his sharp gaze dissecting the room's every detail. "Will, you've made it back," he said, his tone laced with an incredulity that bordered on disdain. "I trust it was nothing more than a drug-induced hallucination, this near-death experience of yours?" His words were a gauntlet thrown, a challenge to the veracity of my journey. And yet, within me burgeoned a conviction, a nascent understanding that transcended his cynicism. "Rick, what I witnessed was real, more real than the code I've crafted for decades, or the skepticism you wield like a sword." This was a voyage into the heart of uncertainty, a glimpse into the continuum that binds us all, I replied, my voice a vessel for the truth I had embraced. He scoffed, the sound a tribute to the walls he had built around his perception of reality. "Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, Will. You of all people should know that." And so my odyssey had begun, not merely a quest for recovery, but a search for the evidence that would bridge the chasm between the metaphysical and the physical, a journey to chart the unseen seas of cosmic dreams. Chapter 2: A Glimpse Beyond. The veil had been lifted, revealing a tapestry of existence far richer than the binary world of my coding endeavors. As I lay in the recovery room, the heart monitor's rhythmic pulse was a tether to the material realm, yet it was the echo of the cosmic symphony that still resonated within me. I, William, had glimpsed beyond the physical, and now a thirst for comprehension consumed me. Liz visited me during the twilight hours when the hospital's halls whispered with the quiet footsteps of the night shift. Her silhouette, framed by the doorway, seemed less like an announcer of healing and more like a fellow seeker at the precipice of the unknown. Your vitals are stable, Will, she said, approaching with the measured grace of her profession. But I can see in your eyes that something's changed. You've been somewhere else. Her intuition was as incisive as her scalpel. Liz, it was as if I'd been granted access to a universe parallel to our own, a place where time and space were mere concepts, I confided, my voice a vessel for the wonder that coursed through me. She pulled a chair close, her gaze locked onto mine, a silent invitation to continue. Go on, she encouraged. As I recounted the experience, her brow furrowed with a scientist's skepticism and yet a human's intrigue. That's a common report among NDE survivors, she remarked, her tone clinical but not dismissive. Yet, the consistency of these experiences across cultures and religions is puzzling. Her words were a catalyst, urging me toward a quest that I had not yet fully articulated, even to myself. Liz, what if it's more than hallucinations? What if there's a realm of consciousness we've yet to understand, to truly explore? I asked, each word a step into the vastness of my own conjecture. She pondered this, the rhythm of her thoughts almost palpable in the stillness. It's a bold theory, Will, but you're a man of science. You know we need evidence, something quantifiable. The hospital room became an incubator for ideas, for theories that dared to reach beyond the observable universe. Our conversation stretched into hours, our roles as patient and doctor dissolving into fellow voyagers charting an unseen ocean. As dawn broke, painting the sky with hues of new beginnings, Rick entered, his presence a bold demarcation to the nocturnal confidences shared with Liz. His stance was one of a man ready to challenge the very foundations of my revelations. So, Will, have you found religion amidst your brushes with death, or is this a new chapter in your personal manifesto? Rick inquired, each syllable a stone aimed at the glass house of my experience. I met his gaze, unfazed. Neither, Rick. I've stumbled upon a hypothesis that demands exploration. Think of it. What if there's an undiscovered country, not of land or sea, but of consciousness itself? He leaned against the sterile white wall, arms folded, a portrait of incredulity. You're talking about mapping the metaphysical, Will. It's a fool's errand, he countered, his skepticism a well-honed shield against the unknown. Yet within me, the seeds of discovery had taken root, watered by the enigma of my NDE. Consider this, Rick, I began, emboldened by the certainty that what I had experienced was a sliver of a much grander design. Every great discovery began as a voyage into the uncertain. What if we're on the cusp of the next great frontier, not of space, but of the mind? Rick's expression softened, if only for a moment, the possibility igniting a spark of curiosity behind his guarded eyes. If you're proposing a journey, Will, it better be one hell of a compelling one. And so it was that my convalescence became the forge where I would temper my newfound purpose. With each heartbeat, a decisiveness grew within me. I would navigate the seas of cosmic dreams, not as a lost soul adrift in the afterlife, but as a pioneer on the precipice of the greatest discovery known to humanity. Chapter 3, Voices of the Skeptics. In the sterile embrace of the hospital ward, beneath the relentless buzz of fluorescent lights, I found myself at the center of an intellectual maelstrom. Since the news of my near-death experience had trickled into the public domain, my room had become a theater where the drama of disbelief played out with visceral intensity. There, at the vanguard of the skeptics, stood Rick, his every word imbued with the acrid tang of doubt. It's all over the news, Will, Rick began, dropping a stack of morning papers onto the foot of my bed, the headlines screaming skepticism. The man who touched the stars, a programmer's hallucinatory brush with the afterlife. They're eating it up. I surveyed the articles, each word a reduction of my profound journey to sensationalist fodder. They don't understand, Rick. This isn't about headlines or selling copies. There's something monumental at the edge of our understanding, and I've glimpsed it, I said, my conviction unwavering. Rick pulled up a chair, the scrape of its legs against the linoleum floor, a harsh counterpoint to the gravity of our exchange. Will, you're a man of science, not some New Age guru peddling cosmic enlightenment. You know as well as I do that extraordinary experiences require extraordinary evidence, he retorted, his eyes like flint. I met his challenge with the composure of one who had seen beyond the veil. And evidence I shall seek. Our empirical understanding of the universe is constantly evolving, Rick. What if this experience is a clue to the next paradigm shift in science? He leaned forward, his skepticism a palpable force. Look, Will, you've always been the rational one. Don't let one brush with death send you chasing phantoms. Where's the data? The reproducibility? The peer review? The room became an arena, our discourse the clash of titans beneath the watchful gaze of the cosmos. Science was built on the shoulders of those who dared to dream, to hypothesize, to venture into the unknown, I countered. The first step in any empirical investigation is to formulate a question. My question is simple. What is the nature of the reality I experienced? Rick's expression softened, the edges of his skepticism blunted by the sincerity in my voice. I'll give you this, Will. You've always been thorough. But this is a leap into the abyss. You're talking about quantifying the subjective, about proving the unprovable. Our conversation stretched on, an intricate dance of thesis and antithesis. With each word, I felt the pull of the unseen oceans I yearned to chart and the resistance of the world I sought to convince. Yet as the exchange drew to a close, I recognized the invaluable role of the skeptic, to sharpen the blade of inquiry, to temper the spirit of discovery with the crucible of doubt. As the door closed behind Rick, I turned my gaze to the window, where the first light of dawn painted the sky with the colors of possibility. In that quiet moment, a tenacity crystallized within me. I would set sail upon the uncharted waters of consciousness, navigating through the skepticism, the disbelief, and the ridicule to uncover the truth of the cosmic dreamscape that beckoned me. The chapter of my empirical odyssey had only just begun. Whether I would emerge as a herald of a new frontier or a cautionary tale for the ages remained to be seen. Yet, one thing was certain. The skeptics would be my companions, their voices a constant reminder that the journey to understanding is as treacherous as it is enlightening. Chapter 4, The Enlightenment Podcast. As the amber glow of dawn crested the horizon, I, William, sat before a microphone, the instrument that would carry my voice into the ether of public discourse. The podcast, aptly named The Enlightenment, had become a crucible where ideas were forged and reshaped in the minds of the curious. Today, it was my turn to stoke the flames of inquiry. Across from me, the host Adrian adjusted his headset, his demeanor radiating the kind of poise that comes from years of navigating the turbulent seas of debate. Good morning, listeners. Today we're joined by William Smith, whose recent brush with the unknown has sparked a firestorm of speculation and wonder. William, welcome. Thank you, Adrian. It's a pleasure to be here, I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the tempest of anticipation churning within me. Adrian wasted no time. Your experience, William, this journey beyond the veil, has captured the public's imagination. Yet many remain skeptical. What can you tell us about the reality you encountered? I leaned into the microphone, the words ready on my tongue. What I encountered was a reality suffused with an intelligence unlike our own, a dimension where the constraints of time and space seemed to dissolve. It was a realm of pure consciousness, Adrian, and it hinted at possibilities that defy our current understanding. The room was silent, save for the soft hum of recording equipment as Adrian digested my words. That's a profound claim. In your opinion, how does this fit within the framework of our scientific knowledge? I considered his question, aware that the answer tread a line between the known and the ineffable. Science is the pursuit of truth, and truth often lies beyond the boundaries of current paradigms. What I'm proposing is an expansion of our investigative horizons, a new frontier, not just in theoretical physics or cosmology, but in the study of consciousness itself. Adrian nodded, his gaze intent. And how do you respond to those who say you're merely dressing up a near-death hallucination in the language of science? The skepticism in his tone was a mirror of the broader passion, a challenge I was prepared to meet. Hallucination implies a distortion of reality, I countered, but what if my experience was a clearer perception of a reality that's always present, yet veiled by our ordinary sensory experiences? The scrutiny I'm under is not only expected, it's welcomed. It sharpens my commitment to uncover empirical evidence to support what I've witnessed. The conversation meandered through the intricacies of neurobiology, the nature of reality, and the philosophies of the mind. With each question, Adrian deftly unveiled layers of the narrative, revealing the contours of the intellectual landscape we were navigating together. As the podcast drew to a close, I felt a sense of accomplishment. The threshold of innovation within the story of my journey had been crossed, and the dialogue had sown seeds of wonder in the fertile soil of the collective psyche. Adrian's final words resonated with the gravitas of the moment. Listeners, we've been on a voyage today with William Smith, a man who claims to have glimpsed beyond the confines of our reality. Whether you're a believer or a skeptic, one thing is certain: the conversation has only just begun. Stepping out into the crisp morning air, I reflected on the significance of the exchange. My appearance on the Enlightenment had cast a stone into the waters of public opinion, and the ripples would touch shores yet unseen. The scrutiny would intensify, but so too would the fascination, the hunger for answers that lay at the heart of human inquiry. And so I embarked on the next leg of my journey, not as a solitary traveler, but as a lantern for those who dared to dream of sailing the cosmic seas in search of truth. Chapter 5: Crossing the Rubicon. The cityscape sprawled before me, a labyrinth of steel and glass reflecting the kaleidoscope of the evening sky. Amidst this urban expanse, I found myself in the hushed confines of my home office, a sanctuary of thought and discovery. My fingers danced across the keyboard, each stroke a step further into the terra incognita of my own psyche. The podcast had been a catalyst, but now I was to commit fully, to cross my own Rubicon into the uncharted realms of consciousness. A knock at the door broke the silence, a prelude to the arrival of Elizabeth, who entered with a sense of purpose that filled the room. "Will," she began, her voice carrying the weight of shared curiosity, "your podcast appearance has caused quite the stir." The hospital's been flooded with inquiries. My eyes met hers, acknowledging the gravity of this next phase. "Liz, I'm wading into waters far deeper than I've ever known. But I must pursue this. I must understand the fabric of that otherworldly place." She nodded, her demeanor a blend of scientific rigor and inherent empathy. "Then let's discuss methodology. How do you plan to approach this investigation? It's not something our instruments can easily measure." The evening stretched out before us, the conversation unfurling like the code I once crafted, complex, intricate, and full of potential. We delved into theories of quantum consciousness, debated the feasibility of simulating near-death experiences, and contemplated the intersection of neuroscience and metaphysics. A faint chime announced the arrival of Richard, his figure a shadow against the dimming light of my study. "I heard you're taking a dive into the deep end, Will," he said, his usual skepticism tempered by a tinge of genuine interest. I motioned for him to join us. The room now a conclave of the curious and the doubtful. "Rick, Liz and I are discussing the parameters of this exploration. It's not a journey I take lightly." He settled into an armchair, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. "Parameters? Sounds like you're preparing for a scientific expedition. What's the plan then? How do you intend to navigate this cosmic sea of yours?" Our dialogue spanned hours, a triptych of perspectives clashing and converging in the pursuit of understanding. I proposed a series of controlled experiments, collaborations with neurologists, and the use of advanced imaging technologies. "And what of the subjective nature of your experience?" Rick interjected. "How do you plan to quantify something so inherently personal?" His question hung in the air, a challenge that demanded a thoughtful response. By the collection of phenomenological data, cross-referencing accounts, and seeking patterns. If there's a common thread to these experiences, we'll find it. Liz leaned forward, her gaze reflecting the flicker of my desk lamp. "It's ambitious, Will, but if anyone can pioneer this field, it's you. Just remember, the line between dedication and obsession is perilously thin." Rick stood, ready to depart, his silhouette etched against the window pane. "Well, Will, you've certainly got your work cut out for you. Just don't get lost at sea." With their departure, the room returned to silence, a silence that hummed with the promise of the unknown. I turned back to my screen, my fingers resuming their dance. The Rubicon was behind me. Ahead lay a voyage into the very essence of human experience. As the stars blinked into existence above the city, I knew that each point of light was a balefire in the vastness of possibility. The threshold had been crossed, and there was no turning back. The journey to comprehend my cosmic odyssey had truly begun. Chapter 6: The Clash of Perspectives. Staring out from my office window, the city below was a chessboard of light and shadow, each skyscraper a silent sentinel in the night. I pondered the next move in this grand game of understanding that had consumed me since my brush with the ineffable. It was here, amidst the quietude of my own sanctuary, that the door burst open and Rick stormed in, the harbinger of a tempest. "Will, we need to talk," Rick declared, his voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. His stance was confrontational, the air around him charged with the electricity of impending debate. I turned, my gaze meeting his. "Of course, Rick. I expected you'd have something to say about all this," I replied, motioning toward the two armchairs facing each other, across a chessboard serving as both literal and metaphorical battleground for our discussion. He sat, his eyes never leaving mine, his body language taut with anticipation. "Will, I've read your proposals, listened to your podcast. It's all very imaginative, but you're venturing into a realm of speculation that borders on the mystical. Where's the line, Will? When does the scientist in you say, this is not within the bounds of reason?" I took a seat opposite him, the chess pieces between us standing as silent witnesses to our ideological standoff. "The line, Rick, is where evidence leads us to stop. Until then, inquiry is our only guide," I said firmly, my voice a bastion of my newfound resolve. Rick leaned forward, his fingers drumming on the armrest. "Evidence, right, but you're not talking about observable phenomena. You're discussing experiences that by nature are subjective, personal. They can't be measured, can't be repeated under controlled conditions. You're chasing phantoms." The room seemed to close in around us, the tension palpable. "Not phantoms, Rick, but patterns. Human consciousness is still a largely uncharted territory. If we can find commonalities, markers in these experiences, who's to say they aren't a form of observable phenomena?" He scoffed, a sound that reverberated off the book-lined walls. "Commonalities in stories? That's the stuff of anthropologists and psychologists, not hard science." "You're better than this, Will." I rose, walking to the window, the cityscape a tapestry of human endeavor and scientific triumph. "Consider the quantum revolution, Rick. There was a time when the behavior of particles at that level was beyond our ken, unobservable, and yet here we are, with technology that hinges on those very principles." Rick followed, standing beside me now, his skepticism a shadow that loomed large. "Quantum mechanics is not the same as near-death anecdotes, Will. You know that." The night air was cool as it drifted in from the open window, a silent arbiter of our discourse. Perhaps not, but every great discovery begins with a question, a hypothesis. I've posed mine, and I intend to pursue it. He sighed, his resistance wavering, if only for a moment. "Just promise me this, Will. Don't lose yourself in this odyssey of yours." Our eyes met once more, and I saw in his a reflection of the trepidation that comes with stepping into the unknown. "I promise, Rick, but this is a journey I must undertake. The very essence of discovery lies in confronting the unknown, in challenging the accepted limits of our world." With that, Rick took his leave, the door closing softly behind him. Alone again, I returned to my desk, to the maps and charts that plotted the course of my inner voyage. The clash of perspectives had sharpened my focus, steeling me for the trials ahead. The game of chess remained unfinished, the kings and queens awaiting their next command. As I sat there, the chessboard became a metaphor for the journey itself, each move a delicate balance between risk and reward, each piece a component of the larger quest that beckoned me forward. As the stars twinkled overhead, I knew that my path lay amongst them, sailing the seas of cosmic dreams in search of the ultimate truth that binds us all. Chapter 7, The Heart's Reason. Elizabeth, ever the embodiment of composed professionalism, cradled her coffee cup, the steam tracing sinuous paths into the air. Her gaze was fixed, a record to the gravity of our impending conversation. "Will," she began, her tone an anchor in the sea of uncertainty, "I've been considering your experience from a medical standpoint. There's a wealth of clinical data on near-death experiences, but there's an element that's always eluded quantification." I leaned in, my curiosity piqued by her prelude. "You're talking about the subjective nature of these experiences, aren't you?" She nodded, a cascade of auburn hair momentarily obscuring her thoughtful expression. "Exactly. NDEs are rife with reports of out-of-body experiences, of traveling through tunnels towards an overwhelming light. The consistency is fascinating, but the variance is equally telling." Her words were a bridge, a means to traverse the chasm that had long separated the metaphysical from the measurable. So you're suggesting that there's a physiological foundation to these experiences, but perhaps there's more to the story? Elizabeth's eyes met mine, a spark of adventurous intellect behind her clinical facade. There's a theory that what we perceive in those moments could be the brain's interpretation of chaotic neural activity. Yet, there's also the possibility that we're tapping into a level of consciousness that's always present, just beyond our normal sensory reach. The calf, with its symphony of life and revival, seemed to shrink around us, the world beyond our table fading into the background. That's where I aim to explore, Liz. To decipher if there's a signal amidst the noise, a pattern that transcends the individual. Her fingers traced the rim of her cup, a gesture of contemplation. And where does that leave us, Will? If you find this pattern, this signal, how do we reconcile it with our current understanding of consciousness? I inhaled deeply, the weight of the question like the pull of a distant tide. We expand our understanding. Just as we've embraced the quantum and the cosmic, we must be willing to embrace the inner cosmos of the mind. Elizabeth's response was measured, the cadence of her speech a record to the careful consideration behind each word. I'm with you, Will. The heart has its reasons, which reason knows not. Perhaps it's time we listened more closely to what it's trying to tell us. As the conversation waned, the clatter of the calf resumed its prominence in my awareness. Elizabeth and I stood, a silent accord between us that this dialogue was merely the prelude to a far grander symphony. Stepping back into the hospital corridor, the scent of antiseptics grounding me in the here and now, I knew that the heart's reason had set me on a course from which there was no deviation. The confrontation with the unknown beckoned, and together we would chart its depths. Chapter 8: The Philosophy of Existence. A silvered twilight caressed the skyline as I, William, found myself seated in the aged leather armchair of the university's philosophy department lounge. The walls, lined with the solemn portraits of thinkers long past, seemed to lean in, eager to eavesdrop on the discourse that was about to unfold. Professor Jensen, the department chair with a reputation for an intellect as sharp as Occam's razor, sat opposite me, her eyes reflecting the wisdom of a life dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of existence. William, your recent forays into the nature of consciousness have stirred quite the debate, Jensen began, her voice a melodic timbre that commanded attention. You've broached a subject that intersects not just with science, but with the very essence of our philosophic pursuits. I adjusted in my seat, the leather creaking softly under the weight of the moment. Indeed, Professor. The questions I'm grappling with tread the fine line between empirical study and the age-old conundrums of philosophy, I replied, my gaze locked with hers. Jensen leaned back, her fingers tented in contemplation. Let's address the elephant in the room, shall we? The implications of your experiences, if taken as veridical, could upend our understanding of life and death. What ethical considerations have you entertained in this pursuit? The air between us became charged with the gravity of her question, a challenge not just to my research but to the moral fabric underpinning it. Life extension, the sanctity of the dying process, the potential commodification of consciousness, these are just a few of the ethical icebergs looming on the horizon. She nodded, her countenance a mosaic of thought. And how do you navigate these waters without losing sight of the human element, the individual stories that comprise the larger narrative? My response was measured, each word carefully chosen to traverse the labyrinthine complexities of the topic. By anchoring our exploration in the respect for individual autonomy while also considering the broader implications for society. It's a delicate balance, one that requires ongoing dialogue and reflection. Our exchange flowed like a river, meandering through the ethics of technology, the philosophy of self, and the potential for a paradigm shift that could redefine the essence of what it means to be alive. Jensen's insights were incisive, cutting to the core of each issue with surgical precision. As you delve into the nature of consciousness, William, you must remain vigilant, she warned, her tone imbued with the solemnity of a sage. The allure of discovery can sometimes eclipse the moral compass. Remember, with great knowledge comes great responsibility. The conversation waned as the evening encroached. the once bright lounge now dimly lit by the soft glow of table lamps. Standing to take my leave, I felt the weight of Jensen's words settle upon my shoulders. The ethical paradoxes of my voyage would require not just scientific acumen, but philosophical wisdom. Stepping out into the cool embrace of the night, the university's ivy-clad buildings stood as silent sentinels to the quest for knowledge. The philosophy of existence, with all its intricate layers, was more than an academic pursuit. It was the very underpinning of the journey I had undertaken. As I walked the cobblestone paths away from the hallowed halls of debate and discourse, I knew that the questions posed by Jensen would be constant companions, guiding stars in the vast firmament of my exploration. The ethical paradoxes were not barriers, but beacons, illuminating the path toward a deeper understanding of the bewildering tapestry of life and consciousness. Chapter 9: The Fabric of Reality. The university auditorium was a grand amphitheater of knowledge, its domed ceiling adorned with a mural depicting the cosmos in all its celestial glory. As I took to the podium, the hushed whispers of the assembled academics, theologians, and curious minds coalesced into a silence pregnant with anticipation. I, William, had ignited a debate that now threatened to unravel the very fabric of reality as we knew it. Esteemed colleagues, I began, my voice echoing off the marble columns that stood as sentinels around us. We gather here to examine the threshold where science and the spiritual converge, the phenomenon of near-death experiences. From the front row, Dr. Harris, a venerable physicist with a mane of white hair that spoke of his scholarly journey, rose to his feet. "William," he addressed me, his tone both challenging and respectful, "your claims tread on the sacred ground of physics. How do you reconcile your cosmic dreams with the laws that govern our universe?" The audience leaned in, their collective breath a silent underscore to our exchange. "Dr. Harris, I posit that what we perceive as the laws of physics are but a single layer in a multidimensional tapestry. My experience suggests that there are realms of consciousness that interact with these laws in ways we're only beginning to fathom." A murmur rippled through the crowd, a wave of intrigue and skepticism crashing against the shores of accepted doctrine. Dr. Harris adjusted his glasses, peering at me as though I were a quantum puzzle to be solved. "And yet, for all your eloquence, William, you offer no empirical evidence. Consciousness remains a subjective experience, elusive to the scientific method." Before I could respond, a voice emerged from the sea of faces. It was Elizabeth, her presence commanding even amidst the throng of intellectual titans. "If I may interject, Dr. Harris," she interposed, her words measured and precise, "the subjective nature of consciousness does not invalidate its study. The brain's response to these experiences can be measured, can be quantified." The audience's attention pivoted to Elizabeth as she continued. "We stand on the precipice of discovery, one that could redefine our understanding of life, death, and the very essence of human existence." The dialogue unfolded, a tapestry of thought and counterthought woven in real time. A theologian from the back row rose to inject a spiritual perspective, his voice rich with the timbre of ancient scripture. "We must consider the possibility that these experiences are more than mere neural fireworks. They may well be glimpses into the soul's journey, into realms beyond our earthly comprehension." Elizabeth and I exchanged glances, an unspoken acknowledgement of the complex web we were navigating. "It's a fascinating intersection," I conceded, "one that invites both scientific inquiry and spiritual introspection. What is crucial is that we approach this convergence with open minds and a rigorous commitment to the pursuit of truth." As the debate ebbed and flowed, the audience became a chorus of mixed voices, each contributing to the unfolding narrative of our quest to understand the fabric of reality. Ethical paradoxes were raised, questions of morality, of the implications of peering into the great beyond. The auditorium, once a bastion of empirical certainty, had transformed into a crucible where the alchemy of thought challenged the boundaries of what we accepted as real. The dialogue stretched into the night, a symphony of ideas that resonated with the vibrancy of the mural overhead. As the final words were spoken and the assembly dispersed into the cool embrace of the evening, I stood alone on the podium, the weight of the discussion etching itself into the core of my being. The fabric of reality, once a familiar weave, now appeared infinite in its complexity, a cosmic tapestry awaiting the touch of those brave enough to unravel its mysteries. Chapter 10: A Soul's Dilemma. The symposium hall, a vast expanse of cold marble and echoes, seemed to stretch on indefinitely, much like the journey I found myself on. As I stood at the lectern, the expectant faces before me were a mosaic of indifference and curiosity, a reflection of the wider world's reaction to my pursuit of the metaphysical. I cleared my throat, the sound cutting through the low murmur of the crowd. Today, I stand before you not just as a seeker of truth, but as a man caught in the throes of a soul's dilemma. I began, my voice a strong current against the tide of complacency. From the audience, a well-known figure rose, Dr. Conrad, a bioethicist whose reputation for stringent criticism was matched only by his academic accolades. "William," he addressed me, his voice booming across the hall, "your quest, while noble in its intentions, raises significant concerns. The implications of what you suggest, that consciousness can exist beyond the physical, are profound and troubling." The room tensed, the air thick with anticipation of the verbal sparring that was to ensue. "Dr. Conrad," I replied, meeting his gaze, "the very essence of scientific progress is to confront the profound and the troubling. We're here to push the boundaries of what we know, to explore the unknown." Conrad adjusted his tie, a habitual motion that belied the gears turning within his mind. "But at what cost, William? The ethical ramifications of your work could lead to a societal schism, to a new era of inequality based on access to this extended consciousness you propose." His words hung heavy, a gauntlet thrown down before me. "It is a risk," I acknowledged, "but one we must navigate with caution and collective wisdom. The potential for growth, for understanding the very nature of our existence, is too great to ignore." Elizabeth, sitting in the front row, gave a subtle nod, her support a silent navigation light amidst the sea of skepticism. Her medical perspective had always served as a bridge between the raw data of science and the ephemeral questions of the soul. A journalist in the back, a scrivener of public heartstring, stood with notepad in hand. "William, isn't it true that your theories are attracting a following that some are calling a cult? How do you address these concerns?" I surveyed the crowd, their expressions a mixture of judgment and intrigue. It's the nature of humanity to seek connection, to search for meaning. My experiences, my theories, are not a doctrine, but a conversation, one that I hope will inspire introspection and a collective journey toward understanding. The room buzzed with whispered conversations, the audience divided in their reception of my words. Conrad leaned forward, his brow furrowed in thought. "Your conversation is becoming a babble that drowns out reason, William. People are looking for answers, not more questions." I paused, the gravity of his statement weighing on me. "Dr. Conrad, the history of discovery is filled with questions that once seemed unanswerable. It is our duty to ask, to seek, to challenge the status quo. That is the essence of progress." The symposium hall, once a battleground of ideologies, slowly transformed into a forum of contemplation. As the event drew to a close, the attendees filtered out into the evening, their conversations a pledge to the dialogue that had been ignited. Alone at the lectern, I collected my notes, the echoes of the debate still resonating within the marble chamber. A soul's dilemma, indeed, a reflection of the paradoxes that I had vowed to unravel. The path ahead was fraught with resistance, both personal and societal, but I remained steadfast in my commitment to sail the uncharted seas of cosmic dreams. Chapter 11: Bridges and Barriers. The relentless tick of the clock was a metronome to my thoughts, each second a note in the rattle of my mind. Here I was, in the familiar confines of my study, surrounded by tomes of knowledge that seemed to mock me with their silent wisdom. The amber glow of my desk lamp cast long shadows, turning the room into a stage where doubt and belief were actors in a play that threatened to push me into the abyss of a new understanding. Elizabeth entered, her silhouette framed by the doorway, a messenger of the storm that brewed beyond these walls. "Will, the committee is waiting. They're not convinced that what you're proposing is worth the investment," she said, her voice steady and clear, yet carrying the weight of the looming conflict. I rose, feeling the gravity of her words. "Let them wait a moment longer," I replied, my mind racing. The committee represented the gatekeepers of scientific endorsement, and their skepticism, was a barrier I had yet to breach. We walked together to the conference room, the air thick with the tension of impending deliberation. The committee sat like a council of deities, their faces etched with the lines of critical judgment. At the head of the table, Richard leaned back in his chair, his eyes glinting with the sheen of confrontation. "William," Richard began, his voice sharp and cutting, "you've been sailing these so-called seas of cosmic dreams for some time now. But where's the substance? Where's the tangible evidence to support these voyages?" The room fell silent, the committee members' eyes locked onto me. I cleared my throat, gathering the fragments of my resolve. "The substance, Richard, lies in the data we're beginning to see. Patterns are emerging, threads that suggest a reality beyond our current grasp." Richard snorted, a dismissive sound that echoed off the sterile walls. "Patterns, threads, these are the words of a man grasping at straws. You speak of a reality beyond our grasp, but I see nothing but a man lost in his own delusions." Elizabeth interjected, her authoritative tone carving a path through Richard's skepticism. "If I may, Richard, the premise of William's research is grounded in established neurological phenomena. The experiences he's studying are well documented across cultures and medical literature." The committee members exchanged glances, their expressions a tapestry of doubt and intrigue. Dr. Melfi, a neuroscientist of considerable repute, leaned forward. "What Elizabeth says has merit. The brain's response to these experiences is measurable, and that's where we should focus our attention." I nodded, bolstered by her support. "Thank you, Dr. Melfi. It's precisely this response that could hold the key to understanding the nature of consciousness itself." Richard, unmoved, pressed on. "And what of the ethical implications? The Pandora's box you're so eager to open could lead us down a path from which there's no return." The conference room had become an arena, the air charged with the electricity of ideological battle. "Ethics are at the forefront of this endeavor," I assured him. "We tread carefully, fully aware of the magnitude of what we seek. But to ignore the call of the unknown due to fear is to deny the very spirit of discovery." The debate raged on, a tempest of words and wills that clashed with the fervor of a storm at sea. As the hours ticked by, the committee's resistance ebbed and flowed, a relentless tide against the shores of my conviction. As I left the conference room, the outcome hanging in the balance, the weight of the day's events settled upon me. Bridges had been built, barriers erected, and I stood on the precipice, gazing into the vast expanse of the unknown that beckoned me forward. The amplification of conflict within me mirrored the struggle that played out behind those closed doors. The night air was a balm, the cityscape a constellation of earthly stars, each light a record to humanity's quest for understanding. And it was within this crucible of conflict that I felt the stirrings of a new resolve, a determination to push through the barriers and build the bridges that would lead us all to a greater truth. Chapter 12. The Battle Within. The morning sun broke through the horizon like a signpost, its rays piercing the veil of dawn and casting long shadows across the university campus. I walked the cobblestone path toward the aged brick building that housed my office, the satchel on my shoulder, heavy with research papers and the weight of expectation. As I entered the quiet sanctuary of my workspace, the scent of musty books and the soft hum of the computer welcomed me, a familiar tableau that usually brought comfort. Today, however, it felt like the prelude to a confrontation with the most formidable opponent I had ever faced, my own doubt. Rick was already there, waiting, his figure outlined against the window, the early light casting him in silhouette. "Morning, Will," he greeted, his tone lacking its usual bite, replaced with something akin to reluctance. "Good morning, Rick," I replied, setting my satchel down with a thud that seemed to echo off the walls, filled with the gravity of the day ahead. He turned to face me, his features coming into sharp relief as the sunlight filled the room. "You look like you've been wrestling with shadows," he observed, his gaze piercing. I sighed, a weary admission of the turmoil that churned within. "Shadows of the mind, Rick. Shadows of doubt and the fear that this path I've chosen might lead to a precipice from which there is no return." Rick nodded, the gesture one of understanding rather than judgment. "It's a battle, Will, one that every person who's dared to challenge the status quo has faced. But remember, it's not just your battle. We're all part of this, whether we agree with you or not. Elizabeth's entrance was silent, her presence a calming force as she joined us, her eyes reflecting a determination that bolstered my flagging spirits. Will, the committee has convened. They're waiting for your final presentation. It's time to make your case, to lay bare the heart of your research. I drew a deep breath, the air filling my lungs like the inspiration I so desperately sought. Then let's not keep them waiting, I said, my voice steady, belying the storm of inner conflicts that raged within. The committee room was austere, the long table, a cold marble slab surrounded by high-backed chairs that seemed more like thrones of judgment than seats of inquiry. The members sat, their expressions an array of skepticism, curiosity, and impassivity. I took my place at the head of the table, my hands resting on the polished surface, feeling the chill seep into my bones. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice echoing in the chamber. We stand on the brink of a new frontier. The experiences I've studied, the patterns we've uncovered, they point to a reality that exists in tandem with our own. Dr. Melfi raised a hand, her question cutting through the air like a scalpel. But what of the reproducibility, William? How can we lend credence to something that defies objective analysis? The question was a barb, and I felt it prick at the heart of my convictions. We must redefine what we consider reproducible, I countered. Consciousness is not a simple variable that can be isolated and measured. It is a tapestry woven from the threads of individual experiences. Our task is to discern the pattern that emerges from the collective. A murmur swept through the room, the committee members exchanging glances, their thoughts inscrutable. Richard spoke up, his voice resonant. You're asking us to take a leap of faith, Will. To trust in something that goes beyond the empirical. Can you give us a reason to make that jump? My response was a clarion call, a plea not just to the committee, but to the very essence of human curiosity. Because to ignore the possibility of a greater truth is to deny the very nature of scientific inquiry. We must be willing to explore, to question, to venture into the unknown. That is the essence of our work, of our very being. The battle within raged on, the conflict between doubt and belief, a tumultuous sea upon which I set my course. The committee's deliberations would continue, but I had staked my claim, planted my flag upon the shores of this new world. As I exited the committee room, the sunlight greeted me once more, a reminder that beyond the shadows, there is always light. The battle within was far from over, but I had emerged from this skirmish with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to sail the uncharted waters of cosmic dreams. Chapter 13, Challenging the Unbelievers. The auditorium loomed before me, a modern-day colosseum where intellectual gladiators would soon spar over the nature of reality itself. I strode across the stage, the soles of my shoes clicking against the polished wood, resounding through the vast, empty space that would soon brim with a turmoil of dissent and support. Elizabeth joined me, her white lab coat a palpable gap against the deep red curtains that framed the stage. Her presence was a silent testament to the battles we'd weathered side by side. "Quite the arena, isn't it?" she remarked, her eyes surveying the rows of seats that ascended to the heavens. "It is," I agreed. "Today, these seats will hold more than people. They will hold the collective breath of a public divided by wonder and disbelief." As the hour approached, the audience filed in, aim-lange of students, colleagues, and naysayers, their murmurs a prelude to the symphony of debate. Among them was Richard, his confident stride carrying him to the front row, where he sat with an air of expectancy. The moderator, a woman with a voice like tempered steel, introduced the forum's purpose and called the assembly to order. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to witness a discourse on the nature of William Smith's experiences and the scientific merit they may hold." The crowd hushed as I took the microphone, my first words slicing through the silence. "I stand here not as a herald of irrefutable truths, but as a man who has glimpsed the extraordinary and seeks to understand it within the framework of our reality." From the corner of my eye, I saw Richard lean forward, his skeptical gaze fixed upon me. "William, your extraordinary glimpse has been nothing short of controversial. How do you defend against the claim that what you've experienced is simply the brain's last hurrah in the face of mortality?" The question hung in the air, its challenge echoing off the walls. "The brain's response to near death is indeed a marvel, Richard, But if we are to truly understand it, we must consider the possibility that consciousness is not as tethered to the physical as we once believed. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, a wave of intrigue followed by a surge of skepticism. A man stood, his voice steady and deliberate. And what of the countless reports that contradict your experience? William, how do you account for the variability? I met his gaze, the weight of my convictions anchoring me. Variability is the very essence of the human experience. Our goal is to seek the underlying constants, the threads that bind these experiences together. Elizabeth chimed in, her voice a signpost of reason amidst the rising tide of doubt. We must also consider the advancements in neuroimaging and data analysis that allow us to observe the brain in ways previously unimaginable. This is not a matter of belief, but of scientific exploration. The audience's response was a tapestry woven from countless threads of opinion. A woman near the back stood, her question laced with curiosity. If you find these constants, these threads, what then? What does it mean for us, for our understanding of life and death? I nodded, acknowledging the depth of her inquiry. It means that we expand our horizons, that we embrace a new chapter in the human story. It means that we continue to ask, to seek, to voyage beyond the shores of current knowledge. The debate raged on, the auditorium a crucible of clashing ideologies. Yet, within this maelstrom, a singular truth emerged. The quest for understanding was a unifying force, a shared journey that compelled us to challenge the unbelievers and the boundaries of our own understanding. As the final words were spoken and the audience departed, the auditorium emptied of all but the echo of our discourse. The conflict had been amplified, but so too had the resolve to continue this voyage into the vast and uncharted seas of cosmic dreams. Chapter 14, Illumination. The laboratory was a cathedral of science, its high ceilings echoing with the silent hymns of inquiry and the pious pursuit of knowledge. Amidst this sanctum of discovery, I stood before a labyrinth of gleaming equipment, the air electric with anticipation. Today, I felt the precipice of revelation beneath my feet, the cusp of a breakthrough that promised to bridge the chasm between the physical and metaphysical. Elizabeth, with her keen intellect and unwavering dedication, was already calibrating the array of sensors and monitors that would capture the essence of our experiment. The soft whir of machines and the faint glow of indicator lights provided a backdrop to the task at hand. "Will," she called out, her voice infused with the precision of her craft, "the imaging arrays are aligned and the data uplinks are secure. We're ready to commence." I approached, my gaze falling upon the complex network of devices that surrounded the central chamber, a cocoon of technology within which lay the heart of our endeavor. Today, we either illuminate the path forward or cast further shadows upon our understanding, I mused aloud, the gravity of our endeavor not lost on either of us. The chamber's occupant, James, a volunteer whose own near-death experience mirrored my own, lay serene, a willing pioneer on this journey into the unknown. His calm demeanor belied the importance of his participation. "James," I addressed him, my tone a blend of gratitude and solemnity, "you're about to become part of history. Are you ready?" His response was a gentle nod, the subtlest of movements that signified his consent. "Let's find some answers," he whispered, his voice barely rising above the hum of the room. Elizabeth initiated the sequence, her fingers dancing across the control panel with the grace of a pianist. The chamber hummed to life, a symphony of science that crescendoed with each passing second. As the experiment unfolded, the screens before us flickered with cascades of data, patterns emerging and dissolving in a mesmerizing dance of light and numbers. I leaned closer, my mind racing to keep pace with the revelations that unfolded. "Look at this, Will," Elizabeth said, her finger tracing the curve of a particularly striking data stream. "The neural activity, it's synchronizing with the patterns we've theorized. There's a harmony here, a resonance between James's consciousness and the something beyond." The words hung between us, a monument to the magnitude of our discovery. It was as if we'd uncovered a cosmic symphony, the notes played on the strings of existence itself. I turned to Richard, who had joined us as an observer, his usual skepticism momentarily suspended in the face of our findings. "You see, Richard, this is more than coincidence, more than random firings of a dying brain. There's a connection here, a tangible link between realms. Richard peered at the displays, his expression a canvas of conflict, his habitual disbelief warring with the irrefutable evidence before him. I can't deny what's on these screens, Will. There's something at work here that defies my understanding. The room was silent, save for the hum of machinery, a hallowed quiet that seemed to acknowledge the sanctity of our discovery. We were standing at the threshold of a new era, where the veils between worlds grew thin, and the light of understanding began to seep through. As the experiment drew to a close, the data secured within the vaults of our technology, I knew that we had achieved the pinnacle of our journey. The illumination we'd sought was not a blinding revelation, but a gentle dawn that promised to unravel the mysteries of existence, stitch by delicate stitch. We exited the laboratory, the corridor outside, stark in its mundanity compared to the wonders we'd witnessed within. Yet, even as we stepped away from the epicenter of our discovery, the glow of our triumph followed, a radar that would guide us through the questions and challenges that lay ahead. In that moment, I realized that the voyage beyond was not a solitary endeavor, but a collective passage, a sailing of the seas of cosmic dreams that would carry us all toward the shores of a new understanding. Chapter 15, Awakening the World. The sun cast its first light on the venerable halls of the United Nations, where the flags of myriad nations fluttered like the collective heartbeat of the world. Here, within these walls imbued with the weight of history, I was to present findings that might well redraw the boundaries of life and death. My name is William, and as I crossed the threshold of the Grand Assembly Room, I felt the gaze of the world upon me. I took my place at the podium, the sea of delegates before me, a mosaic of cultures, beliefs, and scientific understanding. Elizabeth stood to my right, her unwavering presence a pillar of support in the vast auditorium. Esteemed representatives, scholars, and citizens of the world, I began, my voice resonating through the chamber. Today, we stand at the dawn of a new epoch. The discoveries we have made offer not just insights into the human condition, but into the very fabric that weaves our existence. Dr. Melfi, who had flown in to stand with us, leaned in from her seat behind me, her voice a whisper yet clear. Your research, William, has opened doors we never knew existed. It's time to bring the world through that threshold. I acknowledged her with a nod, the gravity of her words not lost on me. Our empirical journey has revealed patterns, signatures of consciousness that persist beyond the cessation of biological function. This is not conjecture, it's a phenomenon we can now observe and study. Richard, who had taken a position in the front row, interjected with his characteristic pragmatism. You're suggesting that consciousness survives bodily death, William. This is a claim that challenges the core of our existential beliefs. How do you propose we, as a global community, address this new paradigm? The room fell silent, the air thick with anticipation. We must first accept that what we know is but a fraction of what is to be discovered, I replied. We then move forward with a coalition of the finest minds, transcending disciplines, to explore these implications with the rigor and openness they deserve. A delegate from a distant land stood, her traditional attire a tapestry of her country's heritage. Mr. Smith, your findings have profound implications for our cultural and religious understandings. How can we reconcile centuries of belief with this new vision of mortality? Elizabeth answered, her voice carrying the weight of both empathy and science. It is not a matter of replacing belief with fact, but of expanding our worldview to include new truths. This is an opportunity for dialogue, for growth, and for a deeper appreciation of the mystery that is life. The assembly buzzed with whispers, a symphony of languages that reflected the global impact of our discourse. A young attach rose, his suit crisp, his demeanor earnest. This is a turning point for humanity. How do we ensure that the knowledge and potential benefits are equitably distributed? I met his gaze, the question striking at the heart of the ethical landscape we now navigated. By fostering international cooperation and ensuring that our research is conducted in the spirit of shared human advancement, the repercussions of this knowledge must be shouldered by all for the betterment of all. The dialogue that followed was a cascade of voices, each contributing to the narrative we were collectively authoring. It was a narrative of awakening, of a world coming to terms with a reality once hidden in the shadows of mysticism and fear. As the session drew to a close, the delegates rose in a standing ovation, not for me, but for the horizon of understanding that we now approached together. The world had been awakened, and the repercussions of our discoveries unfurled like the dawn of a new day. Stepping down from the podium, I felt Elizabeth's hand on my shoulder, her touch a reminder of the unity and decisiveness that would guide us through the challenges to come. The path ahead was uncharted, but we would sail it together, a world united in the quest for the truth beyond the veil of the known. Chapter 16, The Great Divide. The morning haze clung to the sprawling metropolis like a shroud, the skyline a jagged silhouette against the awakening sky. As I navigated the thronging streets, the city was a living organism, pulsing with the beat of a million hearts, each echoing a different chord in the symphony of life. The revelation of the metaphysical had cleaved society in twain, and I, William, found myself at the center of the schism. I made my way to the university, the hub of knowledge and debate, where the division was palpable. The once unified bastion of academia had fractured into factions, the air rife with the electric charge of ideological conflict. In the faculty lounge, the tension was a tangible entity, coalescing around the water cooler and coffee machine. I poured myself a cup, the bitter aroma a fleeting comfort amidst the storm. Liz approached, her stride purposeful, her eyes reflecting the turmoil that had gripped our world. "Will, have you seen the latest? The forums are ablaze. The transcendentalists are calling for a complete reassessment of what it means to be alive, while the empiricists are demanding concrete evidence before upending centuries of scientific thought." I took a sip, the coffee scalding my tongue, a minor discomfort compared to the searing debate that had ignited. "Yes, I've seen it. The divide runs deep, Liz. Our discovery has become a crucible, testing the convictions of all." Richard entered, his presence like flint against steel, ready to spark. "It's chaos, Will," he declared, his voice a barometer of the public mood. "There are protests outside medical facilities, universities, even places of worship. People are choosing sides, and the middle ground is fast disappearing." The lounge had become an echo chamber, where the voices of faculty and students alike clashed in a raucousness of opinion and counter-opinion. Dr. Melfi joined our huddle, her usually composed demeanor now etched with concern. We must find a way to bridge this divide, to bring rational discourse back to the forefront. The world looks to us for guidance, and we're splintering under the weight of our own discovery. I nodded, the enormity of our responsibility pressing down upon me. We need a dialogue, an open forum where these perspectives can be aired without descending into anarchy. We must remind people that at the heart of this discovery lies a shared human experience. Richard scoffed, though not with his usual derision. "A noble idea, Will, but you've seen the vitriol, the absolute conviction on both sides. It's no longer about shared experience, it's about who's right and who's wrong." The conversation stretched on, a meandering river of contention and proposed resolutions. As the debate reached its zenith, a young postgraduate student, her eyes alight with the fervor of youth, interjected. "Why not embrace the divide? Why not allow people the freedom to explore this new reality in their own way?" Her words hung in the air, a challenge to the very notion of consensus. Liz pondered the suggestion, her analytical mind dissecting its implications. Because, without a common ground, we risk losing the very fabric of society. We need unity, not further discord. As the lounge emptied, the day's obligations pulling the faculty to their respective corners of the university, the weight of the Great Divide bore down upon us. The repercussions unleashed by our voyage beyond had taken on a life of their own, and the path to reconciliation seemed shrouded in the mists of uncertainty. Retreating to my office, the sanctuary of books and thought, I contemplated the schism that had sundered the world. It was a divide that would not be easily bridged, but as the custodian of this new knowledge, I knew it was my duty to try. The repercussions of our journey had indeed been unleashed, and now we stood at the precipice, gazing into the abyss of a divided future. It was a future that we would either face together or allow to tear us apart. The choice was ours, and the time to act was now. Chapter 17, The New Horizon. The gentle hum of the university's grand auditorium was a familiar refrain, yet today it sang with an air of finality. As I, William, stood at the podium overlooking the sea of expectant faces, I was acutely aware that the journey we had embarked on together was reaching its zenith. The walls, lined with the portraits of intellectual pioneers, seemed to lean in closer, as if to bear witness to the culmination of our shared odyssey. Liz sat in the front row, her keen eyes reflecting the magnitude of the moment. To her right, Richard's usual skeptical expression softened by a newfound curiosity. The rest of the audience, a tapestry of academics, spiritual leaders, and laypersons, waited with bated breath. "We gather here at the dawn of a new era," I began, my voice steady, "where the once distinct realms of science and spirituality converge on a single point, a unifying theory that binds the physical with the metaphysical." Richard leaned forward, his voice carrying a blend of incredulity and intrigue. "You're suggesting, William, that you've bridged the gap that has divided human understanding for centuries?" I nodded, the weight of our collective journey anchoring my resolve. "Indeed, Richard. The consciousness continuum theory that we've developed doesn't just bridge the gap. It illuminates the common ground that has always existed beneath our feet." Liz interjected, her scientific background providing the scaffolding for our theory. "We've discovered that consciousness operates at a quantum level, entangled with the fabric of the universe. It doesn't simply cease to be, it transforms, contributing to a vast network that transcends our traditional view of life and death." The room erupted into murmurs, a storm of whispered speculation and contemplation. A spiritual leader stood, his robes a cascade of colors that spoke of a life devoted to the search for meaning. "Mr. Smith, if what you say is true, then you've not only reconciled science with spirituality, but you've also offered comfort to those who mourn and hope to those who seek." I met his gaze, acknowledging the depth of his words. "Our findings suggest that what we perceive as the end is merely a transition, a shift in the state of consciousness that opens the door to realms we are only beginning to understand." A young student in the audience, her eyes alight with the spark of the next generation of seekers, rose to her feet. "How will this theory change the way we live our lives, the way we treat each other and our planet?" Her question was the echo of a million others, a call to the responsibility that our knowledge entailed. "It means that we must live with the awareness that our actions ripple across the continuum of consciousness," I explained. "We must steward not only our world, but also the very essence of our being." The dialogue continued, a symphony of voices that wove together the threads of understanding we had unraveled. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow through the auditorium's high windows, a sense of unity permeated the room. The new horizon was not just a theory. It was a guidepost that guided us toward a future where the dichotomy of science and spirituality was replaced by a tapestry of interconnectedness. As the final words were spoken and the audience slowly dispersed, the auditorium grew silent once more. Yet, the silence was not empty. It was filled with the reverberations of change, of a world awakening to the infinite possibilities that lay just beyond the veil of the known. Liz, Richard, and I stood together, a triumvirate at the threshold of a new frontier. The voyage beyond had led us here, to a horizon that stretched into eternity, beckoning us to sail forth upon the seas of cosmic dreams. The final chapter has closed. We're delighted you spent this time with us on Sailing the Seas of Cosmic Dreams. StoryWave AI brings your prompts to life, creating stories that resonate. Don't forget to hit like, share with friends, and subscribe for daily doses of storytelling magic. March 2024. Until next time.